if you have a family member, someone related to you through blood, marriage, or common law, who provides the appropriate support, you could give your credit to them. If you don't have any taxable income, they put it on their return to get a refund. And the example is a 10-year-old doesn't have an income tax return. What do? We take and put it on mom or dad's return, get a tax refund through them. The purpose is to save you your own money or your client's own money. It's potentially retroactive up to the last 10 years, and you could potentially get it up to the rest of your life back. So you look at all those years of tax refunds, and you could get a substantial amount of money back. But it also gets you access to other programs and credits, infirm dependent amount, the caregiver credit, the child disability benefit, and of course, for you advisors, the RDSP. So we're going to rule out some myths first before we get into the actual medical portion. So people will say, I can't get this credit because of this reason, or this is why I'm not eligible. So this is where it does not matter how young you are, right? From preschool, we do have clients through preschool, right up to those that are over 100 years old, everything in between. It does not matter if you work, and it also doesn't matter how much you earn. So there are clients who make well over 6 figures who do get this credit and do get a tax refund for it. Here's where you start. You can apply if you have a medical condition where your symptoms have been present for 12 months or more, and their symptoms are active for at least 90% of the time. And we'll get into all of that. Applications broken down into 4 sections: a physical impairment, mental functions, life-sustaining therapy, and then cumulative. So right now, Dr. McLeod is going to go through the medical portion of this. Dr. McLeod, I'll leave it up to you.
Okay, so before I begin, I have a terrible habit with being on Zoom and finding that as I speak, I wind up drifting until I wind up outside of the frame. So if anybody sees me drifting out of the frame, please just wave your hands or something like that. And again, thank you to those of you who have tuned in. I recognize a lot of names of folks who I have helped with a few of these credits, and I appreciate the faith in the process. So under the physical impairments that qualify for the tax credit, two of the common ones are vision and hearing. Each category of physical impairment has its own sort of definition or requirements, and sometimes those requirements are quite strict, and other times there's a little bit of interpretation, as we'll discuss. So there is a heading under vision. So persons who have reduced vision can qualify for the credit. Essentially, the visual acuity has to be 2200, which is sort of the large E on the eye chart. There is so 2020 in the 2200 in the affected eye, and no better than 2050 in their good eye. And there's also a visual impairment criteria that a person's visual fields has to be a certain number. I think it's 15%. One of the ways the vision will sometimes qualify is if it's part of another set of impairments. So for instance, if you have clients who have had strokes, if their vision is affected as part of the stroke and there are other impairments, it might also qualify there. Or so if you think of clients that have macular degeneration, clients who have cataracts that have not been operated on yet, or clients that have severe glaucoma, and there are congenital conditions, congenital causes of blindness where clients will qualify, and retinitis pigmentosa being the most common or the most familiar with many of you. Under hearing, the hearing criteria are that if a person has a hearing impairment in both ears, despite hearing aids, then they are good. Then they qualify for the tax credit under that criteria. There are also criteria under the heading of walking, and walking is the walking one is very familiar to most of us, and particularly if you've had doctors that refuse the impairment. The classic requirement being a person has to be wheelchair bound. That's not true. The disability tax credit criteria is any condition or impairment that results in a person having significant impairment in walking. And their definition of significant impairment is, does it take that person 3 times as long to walk a distance as someone who is their own age who isn't impaired? So under this criteria, you can qualify a lot of people for things like degenerative disc disease, osteoarthritis of the hip or knee. Walking is a complicated neuromuscular event. So all sorts of neurological conditions like stroke and Parkinson's disease can qualify here. Persons who have severe heart disease or lung disease can also qualify here as well. The walking impairment statistically, I believe, is the most common one that CRA allows a person. Looking Canada-wide at all of the impairments, I think walking is the one that's most commonly approved. There is criteria as well under the eliminating section. This is persons who have difficulty managing their bowel or their bladder function. So illnesses that result in frequent bowel movements, for instance, irritable bowel syndrome, colitis and Crohn's disease will fit here, or any condition that results in a person having an ostomy, an ileostomy or colostomy. Sort of have to manage their bowel function with a bag. But the eliminating as well covers bladder function as well. So persons who have to be catheterized or who have to manage their bladder with a catheter, or persons that have significant amounts of urinary incontinence will also qualify under this heading. There is dressing, and as the graphic says, speaking. So if a person has challenges with getting dressed, either with their upper limb or their lower limb, if they have an impairment that if it causes them to take 3 times as long as someone who isn't impaired, then they qualify here. So persons with upper or lower limb amputations will qualify under the dressing category. Lots of neurological conditions qualify here as well. If you think of a person with Parkinson's disease or polymyalgia rheumatica or severe rheumatoid or osteoarthritis, anything that affects grip strength and dexterity of the hands or feet, that this can qualify here as well. Even an illness like carpal tunnel syndrome, from the time the person's diagnosed to when they have their operation to fix it, they might be qualified for this particular criteria. Person that has a challenge speaking, so the rule or the criteria is a person that takes 3 times as long to be understood by somebody who is familiar to that person in a quiet environment. So all sorts of illnesses like, again, stroke will affect a person's ability to speak. A person with aphasia or mutism will sometimes qualify under this heading as well. CRA allows people who have difficulty with feeding to qualify for the tax credit as well. And that can be, in the feeding category is broken down again into either difficulties preparing food or in eating or digesting food. So again, any illness that affects a person's dexterity or strength with their upper limbs, or their ability to stand for any length of time at a stove, or stand or move about in the kitchen, can have difficulty with preparing food, and that can be qualified. As far as the eating is concerned, one of the more common ones or common areas here are people that have some digestive illnesses, or people who have difficulty swallowing. Those are common ones. We've been able to get people successfully qualified for this for severe TMJ disease because they have difficulty opening their jaw. Those are the kind of illnesses that will fit under this category.
Before we go on to mental functions, are there any questions about physical impairments?
One of the things that we hope that we're going to do with this webinar is to sort of help you folks broaden the horizons about what kind of illnesses will qualify. So many of your clients or the people that you help will have fairly substantial osteoarthritis or rheumatoid arthritis. Those are the common conditions that can be qualified. So it's not always someone with a terminal illness. They're very common conditions, so that if you realize, hey, this person may have difficulty because of this diagnosis or that diagnosis, we hope that this is going to broaden the horizon, or make you think that of other conditions where a person would qualify where previously you wouldn't have thought they would.
I have a quick question. Well, a couple questions, I guess, in regards to those parameters. I think this is like super important because for us and the financial side of things, it's just that kind of discomfort of, I mean, we send people anyways, but it's like they'll say to us, oh, well, I have PCOS. Does that qualify? Or no, because we're not on the medical end of things. So I think just listening to you go through just the conditions that you mentioned, I'm like, ting, 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 ting of all these people, right? Like my best friend's mother-in-law has had fibromyalgia forever. But she's older. So every time we've talked about it, she's like, oh no, I'm like 80 now. That doesn't do anything for me. But she's had that for many, many, many years and has been disabled due to that for many years. My mother-in-law got her hip nicked during a hip surgery, or nerve nicked during a hip surgery. So she has a drop foot. So it's very difficult for her to walk. And again, feels like this isn't something she would qualify for. So just, for me, listening to you review the top level of conditions that may qualify, and also understanding that it can be a combination of these conditions, really gives me that push again to go back out there and go back to these people and really, and try and influence them to try and take advantage of the program. So for speaking for myself, I mean, there's lots of different ones I want to be like, well, what about this and what about this? But I think outside of this platform is probably more appropriate. But I do want to thank you again for that information. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Trish. Is there any other thoughts or questions?
I have a quick question. Is there any truth to the rumor that CRA has a quota of the number of applications they actually reject? Because I've heard this from a number of sources, and it seems that some applications go through and they get rejected for no reason, and then you have to resubmit. Have you heard that, or is there any evidence behind that?
I have no evidence of it. I definitely have my opinions of it, for sure. I've seen some very, very bad decisions from CRA on this. So I've done easily 2,500 applications before. My success rate is 98%. I'm a big part of this because not a lot of people could do this on their own, and there's bad denials. Because you got denied, does that mean that you should stop there? Absolutely not. It means you need to have another look at it and maybe approach it from a different angle. Have I heard really about CRA mandating a rejection? No, not officially, but I can tell from some of the denials that I've seen and had to write objections to, they don't make sense. They really don't. Even from taking myself out of my role and into a taxpayer's role, no, I don't think they make sense at all.
And Guy, I have heard that stat, and I heard it was 5%. I don't know how accurate that is. It's conjecture, I guess, but there is that perception for sure. And I don't know that CRA would actually blanketly come out and disclose that anyway.
Yeah. I agreed. Okay, is there, sorry?
Might
Go
be
ahead.
bad rep if they if that got out, if their email leaked or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay,
Frankly, I don't think CRA needs the help, unfortunately, because I've seen a lot of a lot of applications done by my colleagues where it's pretty clear why they were denied, because they unfortunately didn't put a lot of effort into it, or certainly didn't go out of their way to make the reviewer understand how the person's condition was affecting them. So I know that's easy. That's going to be easy pickings for CRA by times, but yeah, I don't think they need the help that way to automatically reject them. Although it does kind of make sense that there would be some sort of unwritten policy that way, doesn't it, Guy?
and Trish, your question, the application went from 5 to 16 pages about a year ago, a little over a year ago. Yeah. There.
A quick comment about that. From the family doctor's point of view, that was a disaster in expectation management. When you look at the application and the amount of paperwork actually required, it's not a full 16 pages. But it looks very intimidating, and I know an awful lot of my colleagues again just shuddered at looking at this 16-page thing, not realizing that 9 out of the 16 pages didn't apply, and never would. And so that was another impetus for us to develop our program, so that only the applicable parts of the application that need to be filled out will be filled out, and you'll get a complete application at the end.
If there's any consolidation in all this, Trish, we can be lucky that it's only 16 and we're not in the UK where it's 50 pages.
Well, yes, that's definitely a bonus for us. And I did, to what Dr. McLeod said, is I understand, like, looking at the document prior to it went to the 18 pages or 16 pages, realizing only, portions of that need to apply to somebody. Not every single piece needs to be filled out on it, but some of the fees that the doctors that do actually want to fill them out for want to charge for filling them out is also tough on people in these positions don't always have the money to pay for that. So it's also intimidating, and they walk away which is where Peter and Dr. McLeod really come in, like automatically to me, like these are the guys you want to work with to get you where you need to be. So that's cool.
Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to mental function. Dr. McLeod?
Right on. So the mental functions may need to spend a little bit of time here, because it's a pretty broad topic. Again, it's easy to break down the mental functions categories into the emotional disorders, and then the cognitive or the learning sort of disorders. And one of the great things about the new application, actually, I have to hand it to CRA, is that they make it much more clear how the different mental functions do qualify. The old 5-page form didn't really give you a lot of room to explain how a person's condition met the criteria. The new form makes it a lot more clear that illnesses like dementia, Alzheimer's dementia, vascular dementia, the different types of memory illnesses, there's a spot for them on the application form, and it makes it very clear that those are the kinds of things that CRA is willing to cover. So in addition to the psychiatric sort of illnesses like severe depression, severe anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, or the illnesses, the delusional disorders and schizophrenia, all of those have always qualified, but the new form makes it quite a bit more clear where they fit and how they fit. So that's a welcome sort of change. I still feel that the mental functions, compared to the physical functions, face a little higher litmus test. There's a little bit more subjectivity, and I think sometimes my colleagues in particular will make it a little harder for a person with with mental functions to qualify, or whether they'll consider doing the application, just because there is a little bit more subjectivity with those illnesses than compared to the obvious things that you see with a physical impairment. But again, the new criteria make it very clear that illnesses like learning disorders, ADD and ADHD, they do qualify if and when they are severe enough to cause impairment. So those are again an indicator of some of the illnesses that qualify. There are illnesses any illness that leaves the person with a significant challenge in terms of either their memory or their judgment qualify for this credit. Can require a little bit of digging through their medical file to find evidence of it. But if you, as planners, if you guys are seeing people claiming medications for various illnesses, if you see them, and it may behoove the question about whether they have an impairment that might qualify for the credit.
Okay, any questions about mental functions? Okay. So if there's any questions at the end, about any portion of this, you feel free to speak up then as well. Well,
Actually, sorry, I do have a question.
sure.
With regard to mental function, if your if the patient reports confusion, memory problems, it's noted in your file. The doctor can obviously report that. Does he have to have any evidence of such?
So a person doesn't have to have a formal diagnosis in order to qualify. So you could have a memory complaint under investigation. So a person may not have like I say, you don't need a firm diagnosis to make an application if the person has severe enough memory impairment that they qualify for the credit. So I would think that if a physician was documenting that a person had a memory impairment, that they would want to delve into it a little bit, at least clinically, to kind of get an idea of how long that memory impairment has been there, what sorts of things the person is having difficulty remembering, and how it's affecting them. Very, very broadly, there's sort of three major categories of illnesses that will affect a person's memory. Now there are more, but there's things like brain injury, delirium, which is a memory impairment of a temporary nature, and then there's dementia, which is more of a memory impairment of a more permanent, progressive nature. So even if they don't have a firm diagnosis or it's under investigation, they should at least have some idea based on their inquiry about the degree of severity and the length of time it's been present.
Okay, thanks.
So CRA also has a qualifying criteria for the disability tax credit for what's called life-sustaining therapy. This is a category of illness or condition that requires a significant time commitment to manage. So recently in the news, you may have heard that persons with type 1 diabetes are automatically qualified now for the tax credit. So diabetes is qualified under the life-sustaining therapy because of the number of hours they require to manage their illness. So any illness that requires 14 hours a week to manage, or requires 3 days a week, or maybe two days a week now to manage the illness. So diabetes is the classic one. Another common one is a person who has renal failure and has to go for dialysis. The time commitment involved for going to those appointments and the time it takes to have that treatment qualifies. Another one that qualifies here is persons with cystic fibrosis who need chest physiotherapy in order to keep their breathing up. So that's where this kind of that's where that qualifies under this category. So the most common one being here is diabetes, and type 1 diabetes now qualifies automatically for 2021. If they've had it for several years, you still have to go through the application process and make sure to document how the illness takes 14 hours a week to manage.
Wayne, there's one more question. So the question is, do they accept a MoCA test to prove that somebody has a degree of dementia?
Oh, that's a great question. No, I don't, and I don't think you need to provide a MoCA test or an MMSE. You can, there is an area on the application where you can write in sort of the evidence for the memory impairment, and if you have that, great, you can put it in. But the person qualifying because of memory is going to qualify because they have difficulty remembering certain things. So under that heading, it's difficulty remembering their own name, remembering items that are of importance to them. There's sort of criteria, like, for instance, can't remember to take their medication without prompting. So there are more sort of specific things that prove that the memory deficit is actually causing a day-to-day impairment.
Okay.
Is that good, Jeanette?
So, and then last is the category of sort of cumulative effect. So this is a category that kind of recognizes that a person may have a condition where they have a number of smaller impairments that on their own don't meet the criteria. However, taken together, they do, taken together, they are as impairing as any one of the given criteria. So a classic example here is a person who's had a stroke. A person who's had a stroke may have some visual impairment, some upper limb impairment, and some lower limb impairment, but individually might not qualify just because their symptoms are mild. But taken together, you can argue that the person has enough deficit to make up one significant area of impairment. This requires a little bit of judgment and sometimes a little bit of massaging of the information to make the person on the other end of the application understand that the person qualifies. In my practice, I've only had to use this particular qualifying area a few times. Most often, the types of illnesses that I've been seeing have qualified under one area or another on their own. But this is a great area to have access to if you have someone who has a number of smaller impairments, to be able to say, well, to make the argument that they do qualify because of the number of impairments and how it affects their day-to-day life.
Okay, thank you. So
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Sorry to interrupt there.
Oh,
But in terms of the applications, like what are we seeing in terms of take up relative to the 22% that qualify? Are we still well below the RDSP take up rates? Like, for example, where are we in terms of, is it 5%, 10%, or like, does anyone know what the ratio is?
I don't know the ratio, but I can tell you that CRA released a stat within about, don't quote me on this, but I'm gonna say about a year ago, that said 362,000 Canadians have the DTC. They're of age for the RDSP, but they don't have one. So there's a lot.
Age? What do you mean age for the RDSP? I didn't think
Under 49.
Oh, under 49. Okay, I see. Sorry,
Yeah.
I was thinking underage.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
So one of the
300 some odd thousand have qualified for disability tax credit. So if we're looking at 22% of our population, and if you extract those over 49, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
There's also a stat, sorry.
Go ahead.
Also a stat guy that says that disabilities after the age of 75 are prevalent 47% of the time. So as your clients get older, the prevalency of any sort of disability increases pretty exponentially.
Yeah, that's understandable. Now, in your experience, have you like, does it come to your level by the time it comes to you guys? I guess the question I'm asking here is ultimately what I encounter is actually some hesitancy in applying because people don't want to be defined as disabled. Is that something you guys encounter? Is that a hurdle that we have to overcome?
Absolutely, we encounter that. It's actually in another slide. So yes, and I'll get into that. I mean, the thing is, you can't force somebody. I mean, you can lead the horse to water, right? But we do run into it. Ultimately, if somebody says, I don't want to be labeled, then they don't. Then they're going to bypass this. But keep in mind, there's no obligation to tell anyone, right? So you don't have to tell your employer or even your spouse that you get this. Who knows? You're the doctor or the practitioner, CRA, your tax preparer, and yourself. That's who needs to know.
Peter, can I just add that with the population that I work with, which are people, seniors, I would say I probably bring your name up pretty much almost every client and about the DTC, and they're not aware that these, you know, as people start to fail, they become disability because their doctors aren't really bringing it to their attention. They don't want to fill out the forms for whatever reason. But you know, I just spent a woman, a new client of mine has an ostomy bag and has had it for 10 years. No idea. So I would say I come across it with seniors all the time.
The awareness is actually quite disappointing. So I mean, before I went back to school to practice law, I mean, I was doing WSIB and I was teaching the courses on how to do advocacy. I never even heard of any of this stuff. And I was a leader in disabilities, you know, so it's not publicized well, it's not publicized properly. And so technically I would be considered a promoter, but I'm not. I'm kind of different than everybody else because I actually have a legal background. But this is not easy. It's not always, but there are people who are going to have a difficult time, people who have been denied. And as Christine and Dr. McLeod had said that there are practitioners who fill these forms out wrong and they think that they're right in good conscience or just lazy, and they don't do it right. Then folks are denied things that they should be entitled to. So that becomes a big problem. And nice to see you, Jeanette. It's been a while. So
Trent had a comment as well. So he has a client who has MS, and he said that she feels that if she applies, it's like admitting defeat. And I would say, you know, listen, Mr. or Mrs. Client, you're having to outlay extra funds to support yourself through your disability. And it's totally reasonable that you take advantage of this credit to, you know, compensate yourself for the extra spend. And really no one has to know. And to me, it's not defeat, it's victory. Because, you know, you've paid into your taxes all your life. And now it's taking a little portion of that back to make sure that you can sustain yourself, that you can have a little bit extra to apply towards whatever the impairment might be. Make sense, Trent? I mean, I'm happy to have discussions with anybody around this too. I mean, having, you know, 6 family members that all qualify for this thing of various different degrees or different disabilities, I'm happy to have those conversations.
Trevor, your question about the medical specialists to include literature in their waiting rooms. Prior to COVID, yes, some of them had done that. And I had stuff through some of the hospitals, but even at the Zares pharmacy near my house, they don't have anything out anymore. So just obviously because of COVID, but yeah, it's just not there. Some will though. Some will actually keep it in their desk and will pass it out when they feel it's appropriate.
And just further that to that point, I mean, I just dealt with another individual. So this woman works at the Sick Kids Hospital in Montreal, and she had a son who had type 1 diabetes and Addison's disease. He almost died 2 times before he ever reached the age of 3, and she never knew about it. So awareness and advocacy is really key, and this is why it is so important for us to create that that pre-qualification tool that can be licensed for advisors, so that you can use it in onboarding and you can use it in your annual touch bases. And it's a non-salesy touch base, right? You can send it out and say, hey, you know, I'm just touching base to see if you, your spouse, your kids, or anybody else that you're helping to support has acquired a disability over the last 12 months. Happy to give anybody that needs the wording around these things, happy to have discussion with you as well.
Yeah, just more to that, like if the number is as high as it is, there's no way you go to a dinner party, any dinner party, where there's not a single person at that party that doesn't have some touch point. So if we can like strengthen our own networks, then the benefit is substantial.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I agree wholeheartedly. I actually had John Stapleton. I teach now, and I had John Stapleton in one of my MBA classes. He came out last Thursday because I thought it was important that my students actually heard from John about retirement on low income and the effects of disability. And because typically, you know, MBA students are going to go on and service the high net worths in such of the world. But the message we were trying to tell them is that the people that you're servicing are going to have family members, or they themselves eventually will be disabled or have a low income or whatever. And so I had John out, and then the response was incredible. It was eye opening, and it was really, really well received.
Perfect. Thank you.
You guys, I assume everybody knows John Stapleton. No, he's a no, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Any more thoughts before we move on? Okay. So some of the most common conditions that I've dealt with are listed here. Actually, you can start to, this is not one of the most common ones, but it's starting is COVID long haulers. We've had a few, not a lot, but it is out there, and we have been successful with it. Okay, so here's some of the issues that I have run into and our clients is, of course, Canada Revenue. I know some of you are going to be shocked, but there have been issues there. So the people who are making decisions and adjudicating these files are not medical practitioners. They've been taught how to adjudicate by CRA rules, and they can make mistakes. And we do see that a fair amount. A couple of years back, they changed the way that diabetes was getting adjudicated, and the whole diabetic community was in uproar, and things got now changed back to where they were. And then, of course, a couple of years later, type 1s are now being approved. There's also, you guys might find this interesting, but we're finding procedural errors in the handling of the tax portion of applications and approval for transfers. So we would put in an application saying one spouse is going to transfer the credit to the other spouse, but no decision is ever made on it. And we have to keep going back saying, you need to make this decision. We need to do something with these credits. One of the other issue is unsure medical practitioners, and of course their time demands. Like, as Dr. McLeod talked, this application went from 5 to 16 pages. And one of the offices that I deal with regularly said that they figure 40% of their workload is paperwork. Dr. McLeod, would you agree with that in your practice?
Unfortunately, that's true. The paperwork burden is getting heavier and heavier all the time. And this is unfortunately among my colleagues, the disability tax credit form is either so misunderstood or so contentious or so time consuming for a person that doesn't know what they're doing with it that it's become the most hated form among all the paperwork. So I know that with most of my colleagues, when they see a stack of paperwork facing them either at the beginning or the end of the day, all the tax credit forms go to the bottom of the pile if they get done at all.
And that's exactly part of our purpose. So if you picture your client going into the doctor's office or practitioner or physio, whoever it would be, and the application's prepared, and all they have to do is review and sign it, the chances of it getting done faster are going to be quite a bit higher. And they'll probably still charge their fee for signing it and not even have to prepare it. So what we're looking at is increasing chances of success by using the right terminology CRA wants to see and getting it done in a timely fashion with the practitioner. There's also unsure medical practitioners. So there's, some of you have heard this story before, but there's a gentleman who lives behind me. He has an arm amputated. If you picture wearing a t-shirt where the shirt ends down, that was amputated in an industrial accident. So I see him walking his dog regularly. He wears track pants, a t-shirt, and a coat thrown over his shoulders that's never done up. How do you tie your shoelaces when you only have one hand? Or do a belt or a zipper on your jeans? Pretty tough to do. But his doctor said, you're not disabled. So with Dr. McLeod's help, we were able to work through that. But that's the type of misunderstandings that we're experiencing. There's a couple of comments. Are there other health practitioners that complete the forms? Yes, but they are limited in scope. For an example, your occupational therapist cannot do everything, right? Same like an audiologist. They can only do hearing. Optometrists only do vision. Medical doctors can do all of them, but and nurse practitioners, but the other ones are limited. And thanks, Christine. But yes, if you look actually at the application in the individual section itself, it will tell you who can complete it. You're welcome. All right. Sometimes our own clients, we've talked about this already. If you read that first bullet, my neighbor has cancer, you could take cancer, put in any other diagnosis. So I have had a client who said, you got my neighbor the credit. He's on dialysis. I'm diabetic too. I want the credit. And then you have a discussion and you realize you're diet controlled. There's a world of difference from being a diet controlled diabetic to being on dialysis. And you have to take that into account. Diagnosis is part of it, but is not the be all and end all. I've had Crohn's disease since I was in my 20s. Now I rarely have any kind of flare up, because that's what it is. Because normally I'm good to go. I can have beer and chicken wings and be fine. And then other times, 6 months later, I'll have an upset. I don't have that 90% of the time impaired. I don't get the credit. So watch that making blanket statements because you have this diagnosis, you get the credit. That's not always true. I don't want to tell my employer. Your employer has no right to know. And the only way they would know is if you told them. So you don't have to worry about that. And then we talked about being labeled. So if you get labeled, it's because you did it to yourself. You do not have to put a sticker on your car or some kind of fancy license plate to say, I have the DTC. None of that. Okay. When you went to your last conference, could you look around the room and go, that woman's diabetic, that guy has IBS? No, you couldn't do that. It's the same thing here. You only get labeled is because you want to be and you tell everybody about it. So when I first started getting into doing these about 11 years ago, I went, this is too good to be true. There has to be negatives. And so I had very extensive discussions with CRA. And I thought, these are the questions I asked. Does it affect short or long-term disability, loss of earnings through workers' compensation, depending what province you're in and what it's called, CPP disability, any of those like in Ontario Works, ODSP, it has no effect on it because this is not income. So you could have somebody who got medically impaired 2 years ago, severe enough that they had to stop working, but for the previous 8 years worked full-time and made 6 figures. That's irrelevant now because they're not getting income. They're getting a tax refund. You don't have to tell anybody about your tax refund. Again, it's not income. That needs to be remembered. Is it worth it? Here's some of the past results through my firm. I want to explain these just very briefly. So when you look at the bottom left, Jean got $10,000. In brackets 10 is how many retroactive years of a refund did she get? So she averaged $1,000 a year. Okay, so you can see where that's going there. But then you look up at the top, Mark got 7,500 for 5 years. So he averaged 1,500. There's a wide range. Okay, even if you had a room full of 5 or 6 people making 50,000 a year, they'd all get a different amount back because their tax returns are different. You also have to consider bottom right corner, Stephen got 7 years. He got just under $1,800 because he got in, his medical became severe about this time, 7 years ago. So he had 11 months of earnings, then went on ODSP. So while after that 11 months, he did not pay income tax, but he did have the 1 year where he got a healthy refund. That's why he only got $1,800 for 7 years. 3 case studies I want to do. I'm going to go through these pretty quick. An RCMP officer in Alberta with PTSD were approved and got a $25,000 refund. Mind you, they are higher provincial rates in Alberta compared to Ontario. So that refund here would be probably $17,000. Case study 2 is a retail worker, 52 years old with IBS, working full-time, $15,000 refund. And number 3 is a 13-year-old with a learning disability who came to us after being denied twice, retroactive approval, $14,000 refund. This is not uncommon where you see that they have to reapply in 5 years. That's when you turn of age. So that's normally when the CRA wants updated medical. These 3 case studies are here for a reason. You have a professional, a blue-collared worker, and a minor. Very different earnings, very different ages, very different professions, including a minor student. You get approved based on your medical condition alone. That's the only deciding factor. And that was the purpose of those 3 case studies. So as we're winding down, the benefits for you or your client or your family member, past and future tax relief, access to other credits, and of course the RDSP. One question came up. Was the minor's returns based on the parent's income? Yeah, Trevor, that's exactly it. We do this quite often where the person with the approval for the DTC does not have enough taxable income, right? When you think about it, somebody with a severe medical impairment, not always, but kind of more often than not, would have hampered earning potential. So they're going to have hampered CPP contributions. The RDSP is one of the ways you can make up for that shortfall. And yeah, definitely transfer it to a parent. There is kind of a hierarchy at CRA as to who they want to see you transfer it to. You know, spouse to spouse is the most common, and then child to parent, parent to child, and then it kind of goes from there. All right. So I'm going to open it up to questions. Go ahead. Okay, and if somebody's going to type something in the chat while you're chatting, this presentation for your office or for your clients, I will be doing that, and that can be done. If we arrange that, if I'm in Guelph, and if you're somewhat local to Guelph, I can come to your office and we can do one there, or I could do a virtual one for sure, and explain a bit about this in more detail. What happens when the parents split for the tax credit? Okay, so the parent who is paying child support is not allowed to claim this credit. So basically, whoever gets the Canada Child Benefit is the one who gets the DTC. Does that explain that?
I have no idea if you can ask this or answer this, but if you've been approved in the past and it's expired and it's now time to reapply, does it get the same scrutiny? Does it tend to get rubber stamped, or do you have any idea?
Based on my experience, I approach those a little bit differently. And I will make the comment in the application that this person was previously approved and is now reapplying. Do they get rubber stamped? No. Because as Dr. McLeod could tell you, like your walking impairment could now have gotten better because you had your knee or your hip replaced or a joint replaced, whatever the case would be. It's supposed to be taken as a new application on its own. I'm going to give you a little suggestion here too. So somebody, let's say somebody's been approved and it's going to end at the end of 2022. I would strongly suggest that they wait until they file their 22 tax return, get their notice of assessment back, and then file. Here's the reason. If you have a practitioner who does the new application and mucks it up and the person gets denied, you could lose a year that you've already been approved for, right? Use your full years of eligibility, get your notice of assessment back, and then reapply.
So I don't quite follow that because it's applicable retroactively.
Correct.
Regardless, is it not? So how would you lose a year?
Because if you had the credit for 2022 and you applied in 2022 before you filed your 2022 tax return, and based on your new application, you got denied.
I understand now. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
I have a couple questions. Oh, go ahead, whoever that was. Go ahead, Jeanette.
Oh, yeah. So just Peter as well. You know, I think you're the one that did this. And I get asked this question all the time, is that people's, loved ones have passed away. They never did a DTC while they were alive. And they find out afterwards. And it's like, oh my God, my mother was suffering for 7-10 years. Go ahead and do that. So you want to answer that?
Yeah, thanks, Jeanette. So my firm has handled these files for people who have passed away as far back as 4 years ago. They can be done. It is, there's more paperwork that's needed to be done, right? Because obviously the individual cannot sign anymore. There needs to be a will. If you don't have a will, you might as well stop there. But yes, they can be done. It's worth it because folks will even if there was a recent passage, they'll look at it to pay the cost of the burial. But yeah, it can be done, absolutely.
I've done it
I've
many
done
times.
that
And it's actually on my checklist for all estates that I help with. And it's one of the main things that I do ask all clients is, did they have an impairment that would have qualified them? And then we go back. Or, maybe it's the child that's surviving has the disability. And that disability has existed for some time, but the parent actually never went ahead and helped the child apply, or they never got it. So even in that case, I've had one of those where the gentleman had passed away, leaving behind a son who was disabled, and we weren't able to go back. And as an executor, that's your responsibility to maximize the estate for the beneficiaries. So it would be, you'd actually be offside if you didn't actually move forward and try and get the credit in place and go back the requisite number of years that the person was eligible.
I feel that would be very, very difficult to litigate, though.
I think
Listen, beneficiaries can do whatever they want, and I would say it would be even more where somebody is maybe it's the beneficiary themselves, and they realize now that they would have gotten additional supports, and there's a different executor. Maybe it's an aunt or uncle. I mean, I don't know. I mean, listen, I think there's also a fiduciary responsibility on all of us in the industry to bring awareness around this, because, I've seen it where mom is in her 80s and has dementia, and she saved a lot of money, but didn't realize all these credits were in place and hadn't applied, or whatever the case might be. So it's incumbent upon all of us, I think, to do whatever we can to identify or help these individuals self-identify that they have an impairment, and then to, you know, help them overcome their fear of applying, just for the fact of, like I say, you know, Trevor, whether it was you or Trent who said, you know, somebody doesn't want to be identified. Well, you're only identified if you want to be identified.
So there's a few things. So in your office, in your duty to your clients, what we're looking at is not, we don't want you doing this to cost you at your company or you any money, right? That's not the purpose. But if you put on the bottom of your KYC, are there any medical issues in the family? You're going to say, well, why would you be asking that? And your response would be, because there could be positive tax implications for you if certain criteria are met. And then the conversation starts from there. The purpose with this application can be, there's a number of reasons that this has come up. One of it is that you can save your clients a lot of money if you sat with them or set them up to go on this application and to do it, right? So you would, you could go on there, do the pre-qualifier questions, and then let them know that, yeah, you know what, why don't you go home and finish the rest of this? Because you should be doing, or you could do it with them while you learn it too. But that doesn't cost you any money. This isn't going to be break the bank type of program, but it gives your clients or your family access to benefits that they probably should have had all the whole time.
You know what, Peter, I actually say to people that when you're saving your clients money or you're saving them hassle, they're going to remember you for that. And, you know, I do think that you're then, it's like you're taking a greater interest in their health rather than just their money, and you bridge that gap then, you know, and they make that connection. I find that in my own business, I find that when people refer me, because they're taking away a pain point, and then you are truly their trusted advisor then.
Yeah.
You're truly their you bridge that gap, you kind of make that real trusted connection.
Yeah.
It also speaks to the necessity to do this with powers of attorney as well. So if you have somebody that's stepping in as a power of attorney for someone, this is something that should be discussed. There's lots of use cases, as Peter has talked about, and then I think there will only be more and more. People are not really great at planning ahead, but hopefully, you know, we'll get to that point when we realize there's just not enough space in long-term care for everybody, and we have to come up with other alternatives, right? And maybe those alternatives are a little more costly than what you thought they would be, or what they were before, and costs are only going to go up and up and up. So I think it's another reason why this is imperative for you to bring into your practice. And it's one of the main things, one of the reasons why we talked to the developer about pulling the pre-qualification tool away from the actual app, so that it would be a standalone that you could use in the onboarding process, but also as an annual touch point with the client that you have, or your client, their spouse, their children, aging parents. Listen, I guess the stat that I might as well throw out there now is that, you know, right now 1 in 4 of us as a caregiver, we're going to quickly get to 1 in 2 in the next several years.
Peter, you made a really interesting comment around the KYC sort of addition. Just from a wording perspective, I wanted to make sure that I had the note properly, because I don't think that issues might be the proper adjective there. So how would you word that? Are there any medical blank in your family?
That's a good question. Because see, diagnosis is too bland.
Right.
I might take it a step where I would go, Trevor, in the direction of, do any of your clients have any difficulties with their activities of daily living? And then just give them a list of the activities of daily living. People will understand that. And if you just give them a list, maybe have the list, we could probably create a graphic for that, Peter and Wayne. I have no problem with that. Create a graphic that you could put in front of your client to say, you know, do you or any members of your family or, you know, parents that you're helping to support have any issues or difficulties with any of the following activities of daily living, and then just list them.
I've struggled with that because it can get to be too bland or too open-ended. Because, do you call it significant? But what you would call significant, what I would call significant could be different, right? So you have a little heads up now on all these areas. And keep in mind, there's more than, there's hundreds and hundreds of diagnoses that could get you this credit. Don't get stuck on that. Like Dr. McLeod talked about arthritis with walking, but it could also be COPD, right? If you've been to a casino and you've seen people wheeling around their oxygen tanks, how far do you think they could walk? Could they walk 100 meters? Probably not, right? So, as soon as you see somebody walk in your office and has an accessible parking pass, a cane, a walker, those are the low-hanging fruit type of thing where you can ding those off right away. And Trish is chomping at the bit here. Come on in.
That's me. I'm terrible. I have like making notes of what questions I want to ask. And the one area, I guess, is going back to a senior person. So we kind of covered that earlier, is like, that's the general question or misunderstanding or myth or whatever you want to say, that people say, I'm not working, or I'm older, or I'm retired, or I make a ton of money. So I struggle in answering that. So what value does it give to somebody that's retired? Say my mother-in-law, to talk to her, you're 74, you're retired, you've got this hip problem for the last so many years. What is the benefit to her to apply for it out, because she can't do the RDSP anymore? Like, I realize it opens the doors to other diagnoses. So what's the best way to kind of give that answer? Maybe it's just my ignorance that I'm not able to answer that properly.
Okay, so see, you have a bit of a different perspective because you're in finance. So here's what I would suggest. Take a look at her last income tax return. Look at the net federal and provincial payable. Okay. Is it more than $50? Okay. So if she paid, a couple $1,000, $2,000 to $3,000 or more between the two, or even $1,000, then it's worth it.
Okay.
Okay. So keep in mind, okay, here's Ontario numbers. We're allowed to make about $14,000 before we pay income tax. If you get this credit, you're going to be up around $23,000 now before you pay income tax. A senior gets another credit. It's going to push them around $30,000. So now, does the senior, assuming there's going to be more deductions, make 40 or more a year? And I'm being very, very general when I throw these numbers out. But
it gives perspective for sure.
Yep, because you made the great comment that somebody says I make too much money. I had an 80-something-year-old veteran who I saw his return. He made just under $200,000. He got the credit and he got a refund.
Wow.
I'm telling you with 100% certainty, if you make a lot of money, you can absolutely use this credit. Because this goes back to a question I asked CRA when I was, again, 10, 11 years ago, when I was first learning this credit. I said to them, this is literally my question. So if a person makes $250,000 a year, can they still get and use this credit? And they said, absolutely.
Awesome. So my friend asked me this question because she is in care of her in-laws. Because I said, do they have the DTC? Have they applied for it, et cetera? And she's like, I'm not sure. They're not sure. Is there somewhere on their income tax reform where they can go, oh yeah, right here, it's obvious. Like, I'm assuming it's on there.
Yes.
Where they can identify that.
Yes. So I'm going to give you 3 numbers to write down. Okay.
All right.
Line 31600 is if you are claiming the credit yourself, your own credit, right?
Okay. Yep.
Okay. Line 31800 is if you're claiming a dependent's credit. And then line 35700 is if you're claiming your spouse or common law partner's credit. So there's federal numbers, there's provincial numbers. I only gave you one of those, but if you have one, you can have the other.
That is
I
awesome.
think, Trish, it's important for some of your clients, especially talking about seniors. They just actually increased, they doubled the home accessibility tax credit to 20,000. And given most seniors want to be able to age in place, I think we're going to see more and more people actually go ahead and make their homes accessible to be able to stay at home longer. And they have to have the DTC in order to gain access to the home accessibility tax credit.
Awesome. You guys are amazing. One other quick question. So with the type 1 diabetes, I've kind of been out of the game for a little while because we actually relocated Peter from Ontario to Alberta. And
What?
so, yeah, we've moved to Alberta now.
And you brought Brett with you?
What's that?
You brought Brett with you?
Well, yeah, somebody had to drive the truck. So 2 boys were out here. The third one was moving out here and he does have some health issues. So we decided to, you know, why not up and relocate out here? So I've been out of the game for a little bit. Now I've retired from my other position. So I'm into this full time now. And I really want to get on this side of the business big time. With the type 1 diabetes change where they now automatically qualify for the DTC. I know Dr. McLeod, you said you still kind of want to, like, how do they apply for it now? Do they still go through the same steps? Still get the documents filled out by the doctor and send it in, and you folks will just kind of review it, make sure it's done correctly so that goes through smoother? Or is there another streamline for them, or it's still the same process, just not extra, it's just accepted easier?
So if they are insulin dependent diabetic, so a type 1 diabetic, they will get an automatic approval for 2021 or 2022. In order to go back retroactively, you still have to do the proof of the 14 hours a week required.
Okay.
So just having the diagnosis alone will get them the 1 year approval. But to go retroactively, they need to do the full application. And,
Awesome.
so yeah.
So always better that way. Okay. And I know I said one more, but I'm one more. When you were talking about, you know, somebody with like on kidney dialysis and the next person saying, well, you got them the credit. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. So one person's diagnosed with Parkinson's and another person is living with Parkinson's. The first person is affected very lightly at the beginning stages, and the second person is obviously more progressed. Obviously the first person could be denied. They don't get it just because they have Parkinson's, right? I don't mean to belittle that, but I mean, as opposed to the person that's really struggling physically with those daily activities, right? So
Correct.
It's not, like you said, not a blanket. Whoever has Parkinson's gets it. It is a level of impairment that goes along with it.
That's
Okay.
right. Yep.
Okay, I'll zip it now. Thank you so much. Awesome information. Appreciate it.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Daryl.
I came in late, maybe you gave this information. So if I'm a person that is in need of making an application now, and I know you said your app is not ready, are your services available and how do I access them and so on and so forth?
Yes, my services are, my company is going to be doing a lot of the appeals, the difficult files, the ones who've been rejected multiple times, and quite honestly, the easier ones for sure should be using the application and paying that, or sorry, going that route instead.
Basically waiting for it.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
So Daryl,
Okay.
I suspect that we will be able to be live somewhat, pre-launch in the next, like I say, 7 to 10 days, if that works for you.
Yeah, no, I got time. So when I signed up for this, all I found was the invitation to this webinar. I couldn't find a website or any way to contact you or anything.
So I've been feverishly working on all of those brand assets, and you will see them launched in the very, very near future. And I think actually benefits2.ca is available. Now you can see it. I think I only had it published over the last several days.
Okay.
And it talks a little bit about what we are. I mean, listen, I don't know how many advisors versus non-advisors we have on the call, but I will tell you that Benefits 2 is a social enterprise as well. And so we've committed that we would like to have a predominantly disabled workforce, that as soon as humanly possible, that we would utilize a group RDSP to help our employees save more efficiently for their retirement. That there will be a foundation set up as well that some monies will go to. The foundation is really there to bridge a gap in the digital divide. So there are a lot of lower income populations, seniors, disabled, 2S, LGBTQ plus persons, and Indigenous persons who don't necessarily have access to the hardware or the internet. And so we will have a foundation that will engage with charities that are out there solving these problems, and we'll be, granting some monies to these charities to be able to help them, help more people get to the web.
Okay, well, I'll keep an eye out for your website then.
And I
Okay,
have
thanks.
you on the list now. So as soon as anything goes live, we'll have it there. And this dashboard that you came in on, this dashboard is live. Now, there won't be obviously a Zoom going on in it, but the dashboard is always live, and I will be posting all of the resources in the dashboard. And as well, it will be available from the website. There is going to be, I think it actually might be there now if you want to test, but there will be a button that just says apply now, and you'll be able to go in through the website and hit the apply now button. The other thing for advisors is this.
So sorry, I'm not an advisor.
That's okay. Do you want to hang out here? Or do you want...
Sorry.
I said, do you want to hang out and hear what we have for advisors?
Oh, no, I just wanted to know. I just thought you were talking to me on that basis. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I guessed that might not be the case for you, but I think pretty much everybody else may be on this, unless, I don't know, is anybody else not an advisor? Well, Jeanette, you are an advisor, just not a financial advisor.
I'm an occupational therapist, obviously.
Okay, so Natasha, spread the good word amongst your colleagues.
Well, this is amazing.
Yeah, talk to your professional body. We're happy to provide webinars. And like I said, the whole goal with this is to be able to provide the qualification tool to accountant firms across the country, wealth management firms, insurance firms, legal firms, to help them get the word out with their clients. And we know that, like I said, 47% of individuals who qualify for the DTC are over the age of 75. And we've got a rapidly growing population who is at that age and stage of life. So anything we can do to really help them and help the advisors who are, serving them. I would, the one thing I usually say to advisors about this is that there are some disabilities that people don't generally talk about. And my guess is that for all you male advisors on this call, it would be maybe a little bit intimidating and not comfortable for you to approach your female clients and talk about their incontinence. So I think having that ability to send out the pre-qualification tool and let them work through it, or if you're really comfortable with them and they want to have you walk through it, then you have the ability to walk through it with them as well. And I think for those firms that we do have a partnership with, where they license the pre-qualification tool, and we'll throw in some webinars for co-branded, co-presented webinars, and a bit of a discount perhaps off the application itself, so that you have a chance to maybe either pass that along to your client or make a little bit back on it to compensate you for having to pay the licensing fee. I'm open to all suggestions.
Me as an OT, like I can pretty much, like almost every single person that I work with has a diagnosis that would likely have a level of functional impairment that would make them eligible for this. It's just really helpful.
So Natasha, we would be more than willing to attend one of your conferences and present there or virtually.
Yeah.
Whatever works for you folks.
Okay, yeah, yeah, like the Canadian Association, I'm out in BC, but my association is federal, so the Canadian Association of Occupational Therapists. I think would actually be very, very much more than open to doing that because, yeah, most of our clients have a diagnosed disability. Many of them have a lifelong functional impairment. I don't specifically work with senior population, but I know many of my colleagues do. And I don't think many of my colleagues or clients that we work with are aware of this.
I would agree with you. So some of the OTs that I've had the pleasure of networking with, they've heard of it, but they didn't understand their role in it and the limited role. But they want to do it right. And they just, like you didn't take this in school, right?
We did not.
Yeah.
But we specialize in functional impairments, and I think we can contribute to that piece of information and completing the paperwork to the level that we can in alleviating sort of the burden on the medical doctors and physicians that don't necessarily have the time right now to complete that paperwork and get that complete picture of the functional impairment that we can probably do a little bit more expedited.
I agree. My only thing with that is that you need to know the criteria. I mean, like CRA created the definition inordinate amount of time. Now, how many of you here would understand what that means, right? Like I didn't when I first heard it. I had to get through it and go, oh, that means 3 times longer than a person of the same age who has no medical issues. I wouldn't have known that. How would you have known that? There's no way. So
Depends on the practice area, right?
Clear as mud.
So no, most of us, don't know that. I have some sort of touch base on it because I worked in community mental health for a very long time with severe and persistent mental illness, schizophrenia, bipolar, that. But other than that, most of my colleagues, absolutely not. We're not aware. We don't learn that in school. We don't.
Sure. Yeah. My nephew's an accountant and he graduated from the university in town here. And I asked him what he knows about it. And he said, I know where the lines are and how to know the numbers, but I don't know what qualifies. He has no idea. So your accountant doesn't know your medical, usually like your financial person, right? So this is a way to bridge that gap.
Yeah. It bears mentioning too, Natasha, I'm starting to see, and I'm starting to get some messages coming in about the application and the fees. So just to say, in the pre-launch period, the application fee will be $49.50. Yes. And once we go to full launch, the fee will be $99. And there is so the federal government tried to enact, they did actually bring in some legislation on November 15th of 2021. They passed legislation that said that it was called Disability Tax Credit Promoters Restrictions Act, that said that no one could charge more than $100 for help with the application, and certainly no more than $100 per year for helping with the tax adjustments. And this is because there's a number of people out there, and I'm not going to put Peter in the same camp because he's a different breed of person and helping with this. And he, I've seen him turn people away and say, yours is really easy, just go get it done. Whereas other people would, we'll take your money. But these restriction acts, they have, even though they've been legislated, they are caught up in a court process right now. So one of the DTC promoters sought an interlocutory junction, and they won based on a technicality, I call it, in that the federal government was the one who was trying to fix the fee, but those individuals are regulated provincially. So they basically said, you can't do this because we're not regulated by you, federal government, we're regulated provincially. So, we're not, they basically went to court and won. But I believe it'll only be a matter of time before they actually figure out a way of getting this to go through. And so, we want to be there. We want to be able to help people. More people get access to this without having to give up substantial portions of their refunds. You know, the whole reason it came into being was because the government wanted to make sure that more money stayed in the hands of the person with a disability or their supporting family members. Oh, that's interesting too. I mean, do you guys want to touch on that really quickly? Wayne, I think you saw that recently where somebody came to you and they had applied through another provider. Do you want to just explain that real quick?
Oh yeah, so I was helping a person with the application. They had the disability tax credit for a few years, and then they were declined, and then their doctor wouldn't help them fill out the application, so she came to me to get some help. And through discussing with her, I asked her about her previous application, and she said, well, she had gone through one of the promoter companies. And this was several years back, so like 1996, 1998, something like that. And I asked her, well, just go on your account and see, because you don't want that company to be to still be on your account. And she went on her CRA account and found that company was still listed as an agent on her account without her even knowing. So had she been successful getting the application through me this time, that promoter company would have been entitled to a portion of her credit again, even though they weren't helping her with this particular application. So once those companies get on the person's account as an agent, unless the client specifically removes them, they stay there for good.
That's something that's not known. So I've had to battle for 3 years for some people to get them approved. So in my role, I am not allowed to take myself off. I don't have the electronic ability to remove myself as an agent from someone's account. So if you guys are going into CRA with people, and when they log into it's called My Account, right, at CRA, top right corner is their name. Click on it and then there's a log out or profile. Go to profile and it scroll down and it shows who has access. Some of them might be a tax preparer like H&R Block from 1975 that just did it 1 year, but they weren't taken off. They're probably not going and looking, and they're probably not doing anything, but they might be able to. So update and take those off if need be, if it's appropriate.
Peter,
Yes.
Didn't you tell me before as well that some of these promoters, they don't only take the money for the DTC that they do initially, but then they take it percentage-wise years going forward as well.
Yeah, you're right, Jeanette. I've heard of both. I've heard of taking a flat rate going forward and a percentage of the next year's return. So Wayne and Christine know this story. There was a girl that I got the credit for. She was 7 years old. Right around the time that she got the credit for the rest of her life, my grandmother passed and she was 100. So I wonder, 93 years times $30 a month times 12 months was something like $36,000 for doing nothing. That's what my competition would have charged. So you got to.
You told me that story. That was what was sticking in my head.
I just, you know what? I'm a paralegal, right? So I'm licensed to practice law in Ontario. But it makes me, if I did that, it'd make me like I was a lawyer instead, right? But it's just, that's not right. I mean, really, it's not. Your work is done. You did it. You got paid. Move on. Let them move on.
There's a lot of misconceptions. So I'm in the financial industry and I work with seniors. I've spoken at the Alzheimer's Society and specifically on the disability tax credit, just so people understand how it works. And there's just so much misinformation, even with doctors. Like I've actually written letters for clients to give their doctors to help them fill out the form, like before I found Wayne. So Dr. McLeod, because I mean, you're amazing, really. Anyone who has not worked with Dr. McLeod and their clients, I mean, he's amazing. He had a client of mine that has been denied for 5 years and he was approved. And even I didn't even think about it. My husband actually has a muscle issue in his leg. When he had knee surgery, they found out it went back to when he was like 4 years old. And I didn't even think, I'm in the industry, and I didn't even think of, that he would qualify, and he actually qualified like back 10 years. Probably could have qualified before, but anyway, so it's, and my husband has a friend who has polio, and one of his legs is probably about 4 inches shorter than the other. His doctor didn't even hear about it, didn't even recommend it. So, the doctors don't even know, to help with that. So there's just so much
It's worth me mentioning
misunderstanding.
as well, Heather, that Wayne is, you're right, he's a different breed of doctor than I've come across in Canada with most doctors. So kudos to him. I tell him all the time he wears a cape and doesn't know it, not instead of a lab coat. However, one of the things that he has kind of committed to is helping us train a workforce of nurse practitioners who can be consulted across the country for people, because 40% of Canadians are going to be without a family doctor. And so making sure that we've got a force across the country that people can go to sign off on these things is something that is really important to Wayne and all of us.
Yeah, which is great, because my mom, even recommended it to her doctor, and she came back and said, oh, well, she told me I wasn't in a wheelchair, so I didn't qualify. Like, really?
Heather, I'm relating to you because Peter knows the challenges I had with my mother's doctor, who just didn't believe that she would be, anyway, she had rheumatoid arthritis and 2 hip replacements, 2 knee replacements. Like, come on. So he just didn't want to do it. And he said to her, you don't qualify. And I went, oh, wait a minute. Yes, you do. So, yeah.
Anyway, I'm really looking forward to, being able to work with you and refer clients. And I have like a whole list already, because I know that there's about 6 people that their doctors won't even look at the form. First of all, because they don't think they qualify, and secondly, because they're too busy. So.
And that's the exact reason why we're doing this, or one of the many, is that just picture walking in, I don't want to do the DTC form for you. What's already filled out? Oh, really? Let me see. And then if it is factually correct, what's the issue? But that's where you have to tell your clients, you can put whatever you want on there, but if it's not true, your doctor's not going to sign it. So be honest, that's it.
Well, and that's what I said to them. Your doctor's not making a determination whether you qualify or not. He's just writing down the information about your condition. And
Correct.
that's what I think it's a lot of the fact. It's not just filling it out, but then it's also getting calls from Revenue Canada afterwards. They used to call, I don't know if they still do, to find out more information or get more information. And I don't know. Doctors now, my doctor won't even see us in person anymore.
They do a second sort of questionnaire by times. I get a fair amount of those, because I think partly because I wind up doing some applications for people who live in different provinces. So I think they're kind of checking to make sure that we're not committing fraud. So I think there is a certain amount of that. So most of the time, those secondary questionnaires are because the GP didn't fill out the application correctly the first time and didn't really make it clear how the person qualified. But the other thing they'll do is they will send a certain number of them out just to make sure that there isn't fraud going on. And because I have the medical records, that's never an issue, because more and more, instead of asking for me to fill out the application again, they just want a copy of the records that's being used to adjudicate the application. So as long as we have that, it's very easy to do.
Yeah, and for me, it's a value add. It doesn't give me any more benefit, but it gives me credibility, and it also gives me the ability to help clients get money that they may or may not otherwise get.
I would also throw this out there, Heather, when you talk about that. So my daughter, because she was qualified in 2020, 2020, at the end of 2020, beginning of 2021. And she just applied for college, and she went through OSAP, and she actually got a larger amount of grant money because of her disability. So that's another thing to think about with clients with kids with disabilities, is that when they do go off and applying, and they're, you know, if they're looking into any sort of governmental assistance, that there's additional amounts there perhaps, and definitely accommodations. It's easier to get the accommodations
EAP.
when you've got the DTC to kind of back it up as well.
Well, and it's great because once they turn 18, then the RDSP, I mean, the grants are not based on the parents' income, but their income. And if they're in university for 4 years, there's no income. So the grants are huge.
Here's another little, just a little tidbit that a little birdie told me one time, is that there's an unofficial link between CPP disability, the DTC, and ODSP, or provincial medical benefits. If you get one, your chances of getting one of the others have increased, right? But that's unofficial.
Yeah, because I've got family history too, and I think that's kind of why, you know, I'm so passionate about it too. Is, you know, I have, you know, my father-in-law was on dialysis. My brother-in-law had mental issues, and my husband, you know, has and my mom, and who else? Probably. But actually, you know what? I think I'm going to reapply too for my dad, because my dad is on the COP has, not COPD, but the mask, the breathing mask. And his doctor said, sorry,
Is it a CPAP?
yeah, the CPAP. Because I think that you can qualify with that too. Is that, no, you can't?
Yeah, no, you can't really. You would think that would qualify under the life-sustaining therapy section, but because the person is essentially sleeping when they're using it, it's not something that interferes with them doing something day to day. So now, if the person has narcolepsy will qualify, but sleep apnea on its own won't. Although if a person's had sleep apnea for a long period of time and they have pulmonary hypertension or heart failure as a result, then they might qualify for either of those conditions.
So
It's interesting because, yeah, there may have been something else, because I have a couple clients who have the sleep apnea. There must be other conditions, but
you used to be able to get it for sleep apnea. That's a few years back though. So one of the things in comparison to diabetes is your maintenance of your equipment counts as time. So I asked a friend of mine who has sleep apnea. I said, if you're going to clean your mask and everything every morning, he goes, I do a good job and it takes me an hour. So that doesn't equate to 14 hours a week for life-sustaining therapy. So I kind of put my legal hat on and tried to go in another door with it, but it didn't work out.
yeah, there may be some cumulative stuff, but anyway. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to being able to, you know, provide this as a value add to my clients.
Good.
Terrific.
Any other questions, comments?
None for me, but just wanted to say thank you, Peter. It's nice to speak to you face to face instead of on the phone and by email. So thanks for all the work that you've done for the family and myself.
Well, thanks, Trevor. It's been a pleasure. And thanks for coming on and taking your time for this. I know
That was an absolute treat.
I know the 1 hour meeting that went in an hour and 40 minutes.
That's just the passion. That's the passion of the group. So,
you know what? There were some good questions here, Trevor. And I mean, you saw Trish, she wants to know, she used to be in Hamilton. So I drove there and did some work for them, but they want to know, right? And now that you're seeing like 1 in 5 can get this credit, we all know people, right?
I think, Peter, when the next period for information closes on November 30th, I think we're going to see that number become 1 in 4. It's looking like it's going to reach that 25%.
I think so too.
Especially with long COVID and the number of people that are suffering from COVID-related long illnesses.
It's being recognized more and more. And I think there's a few other pockets that are are coming to light more, and they're being recognized. Indigenous folks is one of them. I mean, we've been successful with a few so far.
And I think pandemic heightened the instances of mental illnesses as well.
Yeah.
And so I think that's going to also ramp the number up a little bit.
Like my primary population that I work with is agoraphobia, and it's definitely been heightened by the pandemic.
Mhm.
That can qualify too, Natasha.
This is a whole new world that's opened up for me now and my clients.
So glad.
So with this presentation, sometimes it takes a couple times to see it to get all the information, because it's a lot, right? It really is. Don't be shy about shooting an email to our info account, and we can make arrangements for your office. Or remember, you can host one of these because they're free for you and your client base.
Okay. Yeah. I think that would be very, very helpful and life-changing for a lot of people.
Natasha, I have plans to have a YouTube channel where we break it down diagnosis by diagnosis, and we do short little snippets, 5 minutes or less on a particular diagnosis or a particular ADL. And we put that information, so it's always available to people as an evergreen. They can go back and look at it. Now, obviously, if the criteria changes, we'd have to switch that up, but just to raise awareness. Without having to do constant seminars, there will be, I think, some of that going on. At least that's my ask. I don't know, Peter and Wayne, if you guys are okay with that, but
Yeah, it's appropriate for some of it. I mean, some of it's just too complex to do in a 1-minute video, right? So, but some absolutely can.
It's very exciting. It's great work.
Thank you. We're looking forward to it.
Perfect. Well,
it's
thank
been a long
you
road to
all.
get here, Natasha.
Yes.
Okay. We good?
Thanks so much, everybody. I really appreciated everyone's time. It was incredibly valuable. So thanks again.
Thanks, Trevor.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks,
all of you.
Janet. Nice to see you
Bye.
too.
We recognize you spent your night with anybody else, but we thank you for coming out and spending it with us. Oh, Jeanette's gone. Hey, Jeff. How you feeling?
Oh, maybe he ran to the wash again. Poor guy. That's so
Poor
thick.
thing.
It's happening. So I don't know about you, Wayne, but we're not seeing a lot of people here with flu and coming out of both ends.
Not seeing a whole lot of